Hi everyone, Dave here. You join me on my lunch break at work as I'm here to introduce the latest episode of the podcast Legends of the Spire. And this week, instead of it being a player, I actually spoke to the physiotherapist Emma Young. Now, Emma is a Chesterfield fan born and bred, was lifted high on the shoulders of David Reeves when we beat Luton on the last day of the season to stay up all those many years ago, and has been a fan and hooked ever since. She has had a really good career working her way through in the industry and became Chesterfield Head Physiotherapist and was here for a good while, including the whole of last season when obviously we really needed one. Unfortunately, there was lots of big injuries during that time. She is now at Coventry City, where she's part of their physio team, and it was just great to have a chat with her really about the role of being a physiotherapist, what it entails, and also some silly stuff as well about how far she can throw an energy gel and what's in her kit bag. Some good memories of her time both supporting the club and also her time working for it, and we wish her all the best for the future. So I hope you find this an interesting and enlightening listen about the life of a physio at a football club. As always, I am at Spire Legends on Twitter and Instagram, and Legends of the Spire on Facebook, so please do get in touch, and it'd be great if you could like, share and subscribe. I will see you again soon, and I hope you enjoy the pod. Here we go. So welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming and having a chat. I've had kind of had a few physios on before. Jamie Hewitt, basically.
Yeah.
And there's a few ex Chesterfield players. I think Josh Thompson's now a physio at Blackburn. I want to say someone like that. So
okay.
There are a few players that seem to have gone into it afterwards as well.
I think it's a common route.
Yeah, so. It's kind of a good way to kind of stay in football, isn't it? But not go down the precarious management route.
Yeah, it's a different option, that's for sure.
Yeah. So how did you get into it? Where do you start on something like that?
So for me, I've played football all my life. I've watched football all my life, but I've just been plagued with injuries. Some really bizarre ones, some like normal muscle ones. And I was just injured all the time, and I thought, oh, it's probably a good idea if I go into that route of things, because I already have quite a good background in what to do. I also know how it feels, which helps towards the empathy side of stuff with players or patients in the future. So that's what got me thinking about going down that route, because injury cut my own football career short. And I thought, I want to be involved in the game, so this is probably the best route for me to take, really.
So what are your first like footballing memories then of either of line up watching? Who did you go and kind of see?
I have been a Chesterfield fan since I think I started going to watch when I was about 6. My first game was it was the 8th of May in 2004. It was Chesterfield versus Luton at home, and it was for us to stay in the league.
Holy moly, that's a great first match.
I know. I think Glynis scored.
Yeah.
And I remember all the fans were on the pitch after. And David Reeves actually picked me up and carried me around. And that was my first ever football game. My dad made me a Chesterfield t-shirt, put CFC on the front. I had pigtails in my hair with little blue and white ribbons in. So that was my first footballing memory. And I got a season ticket after that until I was 18 at Chesterfield. So I've been a massive Chesterfield fan all my life. And I started playing around the same time as well. So I've just been football obsessed from an early age.
So, Grimsby Town are losing at Tranmere. Rushden and Diamonds are losing at home against Port Vale. Brentford are winning at home against Bournemouth. And Glyninhurst, the chance here for Chesterfield! Glyninhurst, the ball down the field! Glyninhurst scores for the Spireites!
Yeah, good old Reevesy getting you into A.
Yeah, no.
It's like you say, it's a great first match. It was really weird, that match, because it was like, obviously I think at half time we needed kind of results to go our way and they weren't going our way, and then that last minute goal, it was like we just won the Champions League or something rather than staying up on the last day of the season. It was just magical. And then like season after, or a few seasons after that, we end up having Carling Cup run, don't we? And in the whole Niven and Folan and that lot. So it was some nice Saltergate memories. Where did you used to sit in Saltergate?
We're in the family stand, nearest the Cop end.
Yeah.
Was where we sat on them horrible wooden benches that gave winters, but it was all part of the atmosphere, so it was good, really.
Yeah. Who were your kind of players that you really liked then?
So my favourite Chesterfield player was Kevin Hurst.
Yeah.
All-time favourite. Obviously Jack Lester is up there. I make sure all my playing shirts now are number 14 when I play football. Not obsessed or anything. Caleb Folan I always liked as well. But yeah, Kevin Hurst was my ultimate favourite.
I remember I used to love, well, still do, love Steve Blatherwick, and I had my picture taken with him at like one of the open days, and I was probably about 18 at the time. I felt like a 6-year-old that's just been given like the keys to a sweet shop.
Yeah, very, very tall.
So tell me about playing then. So where were you kind of position wise on the pitch?
I floated around a bit, to be honest, but when I started it was more of right wing striker role. I played that position since I was about 6 up until only recently, really, where I started playing right wing back, just because of my speed, and I've gone into centre mid a few times. Ended up in net. I can slot into any position, really, just not centre half because I'm too short. But I'd say I'm a striker predominantly.
So you're kind of like a Drew Talbot then. You kind of go everywhere.
Yeah. What a player as well.
I know. It's kind of, I suppose a lot of players, you just want to play, don't you? Don't mind where you slot in sometimes.
Yeah, no, I'm happy. As long as I can do a job there, it's all good.
So what was the first bit of kind of education then to get you on the route of becoming a physio?
So GCSEs, obviously, you have to do. And then I went to do A-levels at St Mary's. So I chose biology, PE, and geography. So all sciencey stuff. But I was like, I'm thinking of going more physio route. So I tried to centre more on the physical education and biology side of things. And then I really struggled with my A-levels. I find it hard to do a lot of written work. So I didn't get the grades I wanted to be a physio because you need like all A's. It's quite hard to get into. So I thought I'd do something different. So I went into sport rehabilitation instead. So I went to Hull Uni to do that. 3 years doing a bachelor's degree. Did a lot of placements, especially in like rugby league. I was at Hull City Academy as well for a little bit, doing a placement there. And then I worked as a physio assistant in a private hospital. But then when you're doing that sort of course, you're constantly told by other physios in sport that you're not going to get very far because you're not a physio. And physios kind of have this prestige about them where if you're not a physio, you kind of look down upon. So I was like, I don't really want to be like pushed in a corner sort of thing. So I did a master's, like a pre-reg master's in physio at Sheff Hallam, which is a 2-year course as well. So I've spent 5 years studying. So that got me into the physio part. And now I'm wanting to do another master's in sports medicine, which will further enhance like the football side of things.
So what differentiates being a physio to the other side of things? What are the different bits in that discipline?
So sports rehab and sports therapy, it's all about what we call MSK, so musculoskeletal. It's just about bones, ligaments, nerve supply, muscles, things like that. Whereas a physio, they do a lot more to do with like the brain as well. So leading into strokes, Parkinson's, stuff like that. And then they also do a lot of chest physio, so to do with the cardiac and respiratory system, which you don't touch on at all in sports rehab. So I'd say physio is a lot more medical, whereas sports rehab is literally just focused on bones and muscles. So I wouldn't say it's easier, but I think there's a lot more dangers when you do physio because obviously you're dealing with someone's life in some aspects. A lot of physios work in intensive care, like suctioning patients, looking after their airways and stuff like that. A lot more medical, I'd say, physiotherapy. Yeah,
of which doing the job that you do, you don't know what's going to happen kind of day by day, match by match, do you, I suppose?
Yeah, exactly. And then you can get like some players might come in with like a neuro condition that you might think's MSK if you're a sports rehabber, but actually there's something underlying there that needs a different approach to it. And just having that slight bit of medical awareness can actually be a lot better in terms of a treatment plan. So
yeah. So what were your first kind of experiences kind of going onto the pitch then as a physio? When did that all kind of start?
On the pitch? So I did a little bit at uni, like for part of our placement, we had to look after some of the sports teams, like on a Wednesday, like Bucks leagues. So I used to do like the women's football and the men's football normally, a little bit of rugby league. So I'd say that was my first memory, but first proper, like on your own, no supervisor. I was working for Clipston. We were step 6 at the time. I'd say that was my first memory, and it was great really because everything was just proper bog basic. Like you don't have any of the backup. It's literally you're on your own. You don't have any equipment. So if something does happen, it's a lot of quick on your feet thinking sort of stuff. But I'd say that was my first memory. And then luckily I got into Chesterfield Academy. So I worked with Cookie for I'd say about 2 years. Then I started working at Mansfield Academy at the same time, which I'm not proud of.
You got to earn a crust.
Exactly. It was experience as well, because I think Chesterfield had lost their academy status, so they weren't classed as a proper academy, whereas Mansfield were Cat 3, I think. So it was just more. It was more of like a CV thing, to enhance my learning, doing different things, and then luckily, I ended up in Chesterfield's first team. Because I think James Rowe needed a physio, and Nick Brink, he didn't have the right pitch side qualification. His was South African, and the FA were being a bit funny about it, so they needed someone. So Cookie put my name forward, and the rest is history from there, really.
So going to Cookie then. Obviously, I've had him on the podcast. It was one of the weirdest days when he rang me up, because I sent him I sent an old profile on LinkedIn, a message thinking, I think he was still down as like Portsmouth manager on there or something. I was like, There's no way he's answering that. And then he just rang me up. He was like, it's Paul Cook. And I'm going, sorry, who? And it was Paul. Even to this day, I think, my Lord. But he is just a very infectious character, isn't he?
Yeah. It was great. Like on the injury side of things, he was brilliant. It was really relaxed. It was like if they come back when they come back, there was no rushing, which was very, very different to obviously how other managers have been. But yeah, it was actually really chilled, which again, it was like polar opposite to what I'd experienced. He was just so relaxed about everything. Always had his cup of tea in his hand. It was always like, go and make us a brew. So it was just completely different, just so much more relaxed, really.
I've always wondered. Silly question number one: how does he take his tea?
Oh God, you're testing me now. It's been a while.
Does he have sugar or not?
He's not actually that fussy. It was like, I'll just take it how it comes, really, which was quite nice because it was less stress making him a cup of tea.
That's good.
But yeah, sometimes go for coffee on the rare occasion, but it was more of a cup of tea.
More a cup of tea. Good. Clear that one up. So then actually being the first team physio for Chesterfield, that must have been a bit odd to have then gone full circle from Saltergate on Reeves's shoulders to.
It was so surreal. Like even just being, like assistant to Nick, it was just I just couldn't believe it. Sometimes I was like, I can't believe I'm here, because I've been obviously a massive fan all my life. My family, like my dad, massive Chesterfield fan. All his friends, all my mates, Chesterfield fans. So it was just actually weird being in the middle of it all.
Yeah.
It was just so surreal. It's like a dream come true, really. I always said when I started out, I was like, that is where I want to be. That is like the highest point of my career I could ever think of. And I reached it at the age of 21. 23.
Yeah. So
it was crazy, really.
And
it's kind of opened my eyes to what else I can go on and do. But yeah, Chesterfield's always going to be a big part of my life.
For Chesterfield, and indeed the third corner of the second half so far. Hewitt with it. Willis arriving, but headed clear by Eustace. Driven back in. Oh, it's gone in! It's gone in, and it's David Reeves at the back post. The ball driven in. I think it was by Marcus Ebden that drove the ball in, but David Reeves gets his hat-trick.
Yeah. And do you get to enjoy a match? You're kind of always on. I suppose you're always primed and ready, aren't you?
Yeah,
if you needed, but at the same time, do you get to enjoy it?
Yeah, you do. I find you get very caught up in the mix of stuff, like the emotions and stuff. When it's a really tight game. But then there's some times where I can't even remember what's happened in the game because I watch legs, so I don't know where the ball is half the time. What you tend to do as a physio, you watch like slightly behind play because normally stuff happens off the ball. So a lot of stuff you kind of get mixed up with what's actually happened because I'm too busy watching everyone's legs. But you do get caught up in it. So.
Is it one of those where you're kind of looking for players grimacing and stuff like that as well?
Yeah,
even seeing what expressions are on their faces and stuff like that.
A grimace, a slight change in their movement pattern, because you can tell when a player's holding back as well. So it's just things like that. And say your player's had a knock, I'll monitor them for about 5 minutes after. I just scan back and then go back to where players. I just keep scanning until I know they're definitely cleared.
And I suppose you get to know all these players quite well, don't you? So you'll kind of get to know what they're like as people, what their pain thresholds are like, or I don't know. You get to know who can deal with what, I suppose. Everyone's different, aren't they?
Your medical staff are very in the thick of everything, especially like in most clubs where the physio room is located, it's right next to the changing room. So you get to hear so many different things. You get to know the players really well, compared to obviously the coaching staff that are normally a bit further away. But like the medical staff are always in the mix of it. So, but I think that's better because if we know them really well, we know when they're a bit off it, or it makes it easier for them to open up a little bit, speak to you a bit more, which I find is actually really helpful.
Yeah, because it's interesting having spoken to like people like Tommy Lee and Drew Talbot and people like that have had to deal with quite persistent injuries and things like that. They kind of spoke about how the attitude has maybe changed over the years, and that actually in the early days, Tommy Lee was saying you just wouldn't, if you had something hurt in training or stuff like that, you'd not tell anyone, and you'd just kind of take a few painkillers, kind of hope it went away, try and manage it yourself. Whereas he said there's now a bit of a change, that there's a bit more openness to try and say if something's hurting.
We give them all a question. Like you normally give them a questionnaire in the morning to say like how they're feeling, like how much sleep have you had, how was training yesterday, are you feeling sore today, and then they can put whatever comments on they want. And none of the coaching staff see any of that. It's literally just medical. So then we can just pull them to one side and just say, look, what's happening. But you do get your old-fashioned players, they're still there, which will just battle through anything. And I found they're normally your centre halves. Their leg could be hanging off and they still won't tell you anything. And then I found the younger ones are a bit more open to discussing about what's going on. So it's interesting trying to balance both sides, like trying to get a stubborn centre half to actually talk about what their body's doing is quite a challenge.
And I suppose it's your role sometimes to tell people they've got to come off when they don't want to come off.
The issue is that you say you need to come off. You tell the manager they need to come off, and the player's like, no, I'm staying on. And I'm like, I can't do anything unless it's like a life or death situation. I literally sometimes you can't do anything. It's down to the player and the manager a lot of the time, which a lot of people don't realise. So
yeah, and I remember Jamie Grimes from a few games ago where he was saying, he likes it best when there's kind of boots flying in the box and throwing his heads at things and stuff like that.
Now, can I literally sit there watching the game? You could just hear me go, ooh, literally the whole game. And everyone's like, Emma, what are you doing? I'm like, I just can't help it. I just know what's going to happen. And it's just not good.
So how does a match day kind of work for you from start? How early do you have to get to the ground on like a match day?
So it's at Coventry, we don't get there as early. Because I find there's less to do because there's more staff, so you can share like responsibilities out, so everything's a lot faster. But Chesterfield, it was normally like 3 hours before. That was the meet time for staff, but I used to get there about 3.5 hours before, 3 hours 45 before, just to sort out like all the tape, all the under wrap that was going to wear, put the deep heat out, put the Vaseline out, get the salts ready, get the Vaseline ready, fetch the food from upstairs, help the sports science with the bottles, stuff like that. And then the players would start coming in normally about 1, they'd start drifting through. And then from then it's carnage. Like they're all coming in last minute going, I need a rub. And I'm like, I've only got one pair of hands, should have come in like 10 minutes ago when I was free, sort of thing. So yeah, it was difficult when you were on your own. So like, I had massaging to do, taping to do, mobilizations to do. It was very hectic, but it was quite good at the same time. It's hard to explain, but
yeah. Do you have lots of lists then of who has what? And because I know like your kit man generally has. Have you got a separate list as well in terms of who uses what tapes and stuff like that?
You kind of, when you start to know players, you know exactly what they want. So normally I'll set out a set of tape for whatever players want. So some will have like a sturdy strap in, so put that tape to one side, and some just want a looser one. And I normally know as soon as they walk in, I get the tape. I just know who's having what. And people have the same rubs over and over again, because it's more like a superstition thing. So yeah, you get in a routine quite easily. So for me, it wasn't a surprise when someone had walked through the door. You knew exactly what you were doing. It's just sometimes it just give you much time to do it.
And in terms of drinks, so I kind of like watching a bit of marathon running and stuff like that, and they all have their own makeup of drinks that they will have on long distance runs and stuff like that. Do footballers have things like that as well? Do they have their own specific brands that they like of certain electrolytes or things like that, or are they all just pretty much water?
We literally just use what we buy them, really. At Chesterfield, like some of them didn't use electrolytes, some of them liked them. It was more player preference, really. Like some would just rather drink water, some would like a few tablets in their drink. So we'd make a few of them up before, or some would just be happy, with one of the electrolyte gels, like energy gels. Whereas at Coventry, they do sweat testing. So someone comes in, they'll put something in one of the follicles and just see how much they sweat. And then we can give them a tablet based on how much they sweat to put in their drink. And they're supposed to have 1 tablet per every 500 ml of water they drink, which is easier because it means we keep on top of their hydration, which just minimises the risk of anything happening, really.
And the silly question number 2, like, do you get good at throwing gels onto pitches? Because you see it when there's a break in play, you'll see an energy gel fly 40 yards at Curtis Weston or something.
Throws are a bit dodgy sometimes, especially when it's cold. It's very nerve-wracking in front of all them people. But yeah, you get used to swatting gels around. So I always carry some in my run-on bag as well, because I know players will come and nick them when I run on. So
yeah. And that was one of my questions. In your bag, what's in your bag?
Oh, it's a secret. When I first started, everything was in my bag, because I was like, I want to be ready for every different scenario, which is like the worst thing you can do, because obviously when you run on the pitch, it's like I can't remember where I've put anything. So now I literally have 3 different compartments. I have like a blood section, I have like an airway / emergency section, and then I'll have like an everything else section. So in the blood section, it's normally like glue, so we use like a liquid band, Vaseline, nasal plugs, steri strips, plasters, hemo stop bandages, stuff like that, all in one section with some like spare gloves. In my emergency section, we carry airways with us normally, because obviously say a player's like just gone down or they've got a severe head injury and their airway shuts, we need to open it. So I have a few different airways depending on the situation. So if it's a cardiac arrest, we use something called a supraglottic airway. So it's like a big, thick, gel-like substance airway. And then the other times we just use something called an OPA, which is just a smaller plastic one that's more short-term. I also carry like a pocket valve mask in there. Ever, God forbid, a cardiac arrest happens, it's just easy access. Also carry a salbutamol inhaler for like any asthma attacks, and an EpiPen as well, because you just never know what's going to happen. In my everything else, it ranges from different types of tapes that I might need, bit of bandage, deep heat's a big one because they all ask for it when I'm along. Like, oh, my leg's a bit sore, can I have some deep heat? And it's like, oh, all right. So deep heat, Vaseline, salts, Vicks, and then in the bottle bits, I'll have a bottle of electrolyte, and then I'll have a load of gels. I normally carry a packet of sweets for myself as well.
Never get anyone stealing a wine gum when you're on the pitch.
Denton, horrendous. Used to always nick my wine gums, that guy.
I can imagine. And I suppose, obviously, you can't talk about any injuries or players or anything like that because you're a medical professional, so all that stuff's confidential. But I imagine you'll have had some moments where already in your career where you've been like, oh heck, what do I do here? And you having to kind of think on your feet a bit, just because, like I say, there's a lot of blunt force things that happen, isn't there, and stuff like that throughout. Yeah,
and I find with the National League, it's very come and go. So obviously at Chesterfield, Notts County, Wrexham, all the medical stuff's superb. We've got everything we need. The paramedics are there. When you go to places like Weymouth, when all you've got is their club doc, who's just a GP registrar, that's free for that game. I don't think there's any crowd paramedics because it's under a certain capacity. I think it has to be over 5,000 for there to need a stadium doc and paramedics. And then only one medical staff on their team. It makes situations very difficult for us to manage. So yeah, it's very think on your feet. How do we get this player off safely as fast as possible without compromising anything? It is difficult, but I find like as the facilities are better, it makes life so much easier. And also having like at Coventry, there's 4 medical staff. There's 1 doctor and 3 physios. We have 2 interns as well. So it just makes life so much easier. We've all got designated roles. So when an emergency scenario does arise, we all know exactly what we're doing. Whereas when it's just you, it's a bit scary.
Yeah. So how does it work over a season? How does your workload change? Because obviously you have your pre-season where everyone's getting up to fitness again and stuff like that, and then you get that point of the season where it's like Tuesday, Saturday when you're like 6 months into the season. How does that kind of all pan out for you over a season from start to finish?
So pre-season is normally just filled with blisters. There's so many blisters, it's ridiculous. You often get like burns as well from the grass, like when they go sliding in, so like turf burns, blisters. We get a lot of like really small muscle injuries, a lot of delayed onset muscle soreness that you have to manage. But pre-season's pretty easy because they've all had a massive rest, and you ease them into it and you just build the load gradually and then bring it off and then build it back up. First part of the season is normally quite good, but then when you hit that Saturday, Tuesday, you start getting major problems. Again, it depends on the management as well, right? How hard are they running them in training? Because if they're running them into the ground, you just end up with so many muscle injuries, and there's nothing you can do to prevent them. Like, we can do everything we can. The sports science will do everything they can, but sometimes it just happens. And I find when it's like nitty gritty end of the season, you end up with like a lot of contact based stuff, especially when it's like big games, especially like to players that are doing well. Like we had loads of contact injuries last year. It was horrendous. Like muscle injuries weren't actually that bad. So I'd say it's pre-season's quite easy, just blisters and small muscle injuries, and then in the mid-season it's a lot. You start getting your big hamstrings, get some groin, a little bit of quad, and then you get your contact-based stuff, which is normally a longer time out. And then towards the latter end, last few weeks of the season, it quietens off again. So it's mid-season's in the thick of it. It's hard.
It's interesting, yeah. And I suppose with managers and stuff like that, I mean, I've heard it before from data analysts and stuff like that I've spoken to, where they've said, I can tell the manager all this stuff. He doesn't have to listen to it. It'd be a bit frustrating sometimes if you're saying, don't
it's
play that
hard as
player,
well.
and
So
then you'll see him on the team sheet.
it's hard. So say your best player his load is in what we call a spike. So we use GPS and monitor their load and whatever. And it'll flag up red if they've done more than they're used to doing, which normally happens for like Saturday, Tuesday. That's quite normal. But when you tell a manager this player could get injured and he's your best player, and you're like, you need to limit his minutes, doesn't go down very well.
I can imagine.
Yeah. But there has been times you'll say to a manager, look, this player's going to struggle if you play him this long. So I'd suggest bringing him off at this time. And there has been times where a player's played longer and they have got injured that same game. So the science is there, but it's so difficult because you need to win. So it's a very fine balancing act.
You never give a look to the manager as if to say, "Told you."
Oh, I wouldn't dare. No.
I suppose it's a pressured environment for a manager, isn't it? If they don't play the best player and they're on the bench, all the fans go, "Why is he putting him on the bench?"
Exactly. And there's always that chance that nothing's going to happen, and then you've just wasted like an extra 25 minutes of them potentially scoring a goal. So it's difficult, but that's why you just have to communicate with one another and try and see what's best, really.
Yeah. And how's things changed then? So obviously you're at Coventry now, so you're Championship. And I had a chat with Graham Scott recently, the referee, because he did the last game at Saltergate and is obviously now Premier League. And he was saying how refereeing a National League match to a Premier League match is just way different because the pitches are better. He can tell where the ball is going to run. There's less contact in them, they're just because they're technically better and it's a bit less blood and thunder. From like your point of view, have you noticed a bit of a difference in kind of what type of injuries they are or what happens on a pitch or things like that?
In fact, we have a lot less contact. We've hardly had any really. Well, we have, but there's a lot less and they're a lot less serious. So we haven't had any fractures or anything like that. Whereas at Chesterfield, there were some horrendous ones. But we've had none of that. We've had a few big muscle injuries, but again, that's normal. But I found we've actually had less injuries than you do at a National League level. I don't know if it's because, there's more staff involved for one. But also Mark Robbins is actually, he does listen. So that does help when the manager listens. But yeah, there's a lot less contact. I'd say it's more intense, like the games are a lot more intense. But there's no like flying tackles or anything like that. So a lot of its injuries can be like high speed running based injuries. So
yeah. And obviously we've seen with Paul Cook this year that he does kind of keep players out of the team a lot longer when they've had injuries and stuff like that, which I suppose makes your job a lot easier, doesn't it? If people are given the proper time to recover from injuries and stuff like that.
Yeah, it does. But on the other end of that, you've got like, we need to get them involved now because they're not going to improve at all if they're just sat with me. Like we can only do so much. Like sometimes the only way to get over that next bit of the injury is to actually play. You can never replicate a game in training. It's just totally different. All the GPS data is different. You just can't replicate it. So sometimes just actually putting them in is a good thing, but it's good to err on the side of caution, really.
Quality needed from Mandeville. It's not a bad ball. And it came out to Weston! What a hit! Sublime strike from Curtis Weston. He could hardly have hit that any better. And Chesterfield might just have snatched this right at the end.
And how does the mental side of things work? Because obviously you can be spending a lot of time with players that are off the pitch for quite a long time. They've kind of a lot of them young men, and it can be tough, can't it, for a lot of them? So you can end up becoming the listening post, I suppose, and you have to listen to everything. So how does that all work? I like to think of myself
like a mother figure. That's because I find what I've heard from like a lot of players is previous physios, they don't listen, is what they say. But I don't know if I've had a lot of experience with injuries, and I've found just just talking to someone about your frustration helps. So I was like, I'm just going to listen. And yeah, we have banter and stuff like that, but they know that I can switch it off when I need to, and turn it serious. But at Coventry, it's made easier because we have a sports psychologist. But yeah, it's again knowing your players. Like, some players won't want to talk and they're not bothered, and you're not worried about them. But then there's some players that you think if they get an injury, they're going to struggle. And I just kind of give them that option. I'm just like, I'm here if you need to talk. I kind of just open a door for them, and it's just their choice if they want to use it. I find mixing things up as well, like in a long-term injury, helps. So what we tend, with some players that have been in the league, they can go to St George's Park for like a week of rehab. They get 3 weeks a year, basically. And we find actually sending them there, it's a different gym. It's obviously England use that gym, so it's class. They've got all the testing facilities, so we get data on their injuries, and it's with a different person. So it just mixes it up a little bit and freshens it up, which they always come back a little bit brighter after that. So I find mixing things up and just opening a door for them helps. But some players, again, opposite, just need to kick up the bum. It's just knowing them and just knowing who reacts best to what, really.
Yeah, I remember Jamie Hewitt saying similar in terms of, all those around those Saltergate years. They kind of become part of his team then, because they end up can sometimes be a bit isolated from the main squad, can't they, if they're kind of taken out of that picture for a bit. So it can be, kind of need a different squad to be a part of, I suppose, don't they, during that time?
Yeah.
And there's been a big thing in the National League this week about contracts, and they want to change their contracts and give them, put them on statutory sick pay after a certain amount of time, and give the employers a chance to just release them from contracts and stuff like that. I imagine you think, well, it's just ridiculous.
I think it's disgraceful, personally, because, well, injuries are part of the job in football. It is in any sport: cricket, rugby, netball, gymnastics, whatever. It's a risk. Especially like a lot of footballers, like their family and stuff. I know a lot of them, their wives don't work, so they'll stay home and look after the kids. Well, if you put them on statutory sick pay, what are they going to do? Especially, if they get like an ACL injury where they're out for 9 months. I think it's quite scary, really.
And it's like, why would you fling yourself into a tackle? Anything that will put a bit of doubt in your head to, like, I can't afford to get injured right now. And I suppose conversely, it could put pressure on people like you in your industry as well, in terms of, I've got another month, or they can terminate my contract. You've got to get me back within this period of time. It can put a lot of pressure on you, can't it?
Yeah, I don't know how they've come up with it, but it's a terrible idea. I think it's terrible. But I honestly don't have the words. I just think it's a terrible idea.
Yeah, they've obviously done it without any consultation or thought whatsoever. And I see clubs like Macclesfield coming out and basically saying, we're not going to do it. Anyway, will abide by contracts, which is, you kind of hope that a lot of the clubs will do that.
Yeah.
And then they override it. Interesting. So you're at Coventry now. So Championship football must be nice to watch and be part of that as a bit of a new journey.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's opened my eyes, that's for sure. But sometimes I have to pinch myself. Like, first game of season, we're at Sunderland away, and the noise, the atmosphere was just incredible. I tell you what, one of the best atmospheres I've been at was Blackpool away. It was just loud the entire time. Coventry took 4,000 fans. Coventry's got a great support. We've just sold out for Swansea away as well. But the atmosphere is just incredible. The football's really intense and good. There's not many crunching tackles. To be fair, we don't have to do much during a game. Like, I remember at Chesterfield, I was running on like a few times a game. Whereas at Coventry, like, the head physio only runs on, I wouldn't, sometimes not even once a game. So that's completely different. But I just find it mental where I am at the minute, and I'm enjoying it very much.
And obviously, does this then open your eyes in terms of, right, actually from here on in, what could happen next? It's interesting. It opens a lot of doors potentially for you, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I never thought I'd be at championship level. I'm only 25, so for me, I was like, I just can't believe what's happening. But yeah, it has made me think, like, what could I actually go on and do? I'd say my ultimate ambition, which I'm sure most physios are, is England, obviously. But even just heading up my own department in anywhere in the league, ideally, and working in the Premier League would be an absolute dream. But yeah, there's just loads I want to do. But it's definitely opened a few doors. You get to meet loads of physios as well. So networking, it's been great for me, which is going to help me out in the future. I'm also a bit less stressed as well, which is nice because obviously there's more staff, so it just makes life a little bit easier. And I find actually not being stressed means I can actually think about what I'm doing with each player, why I'm doing it, what else I could do. Maybe I can do a bit more research-based things as well because I have more time. So yeah.
Obviously, you'll not get to go to as many Chesterfield games.
One. One.
Yeah. Is that do you still kind of keep in touch whenever they're on BT Sport or the like or stuff like that?
Yeah, I'll always listen in if I can to Phil Tooley on 1866, always. But it's difficult because obviously we're playing and stuff, so I will check like the halftime scores, and I always check the full-time score, whatever game it is. So yeah, I do keep a close eye on what's happening.
Yeah. Great. What do you think is going to happen this year then?
I think it'll be us. Well, Chesterfield Notts County playoff final. I think we might just nick it,
Yeah. I agree with you. I've kind of thought from the start of the season, I thought in the playoff final,
and Notts County are going to be really disappointed they've not got first place promotion, so they're going to be a bit down in the dumps, and Chesterfield are going to be like, right,
yeah,
we'll just nick it.
Know what we need to do. Yeah, certainly the new players he's brought in seems to have done the business, so that's good. Do you keep in touch with any of the players from last year at all? Do you still?
Sometimes I keep in touch with Nathan Tyson, a little bit. Who else have I spoke to? Spoke to Manny a few times. Cabby I've spoke to a few times. Hayden Hollis. I had to check in with how he's getting. A lot of them are like the ones that I've spent a lot of time with injury wise. But yeah, I'd say they're the ones I keep in touch with the most.
Yeah, because when I spoke to George Carline, he said there was like about a handful of them that became quite close just because they were all in the gym together.
It was quite nice though, because at least they weren't going through it on their own. It was became quite a close-knit group, really, which is unfortunate, but it was better than being on their own.
Yeah, totally. Great. Well, good luck with the rest of the season with Coventry. Obviously, outside chance of playoff, so you never know. It could be an interesting end to the season for you. And then good luck with everything that goes on in the future. We'll see with interest, I'm sure, where you end up going on to.
Thank you very much for having me, and let's hope Chesterfield win in the playoffs.
Fingers crossed.